Hi, everyone. Uh, I have my good friend and colleague, Christopher Hobbs. I should say Dr. Christopher Hobbs because he's a PhD now. What is it in biology, Christopher? Botany?
Uh, yeah, it's called integrative biology. Yes.
I'm showing Christopher's website because anything I have to say about Christopher uh, is way too long. I know him personally. We've worked together closely in clinic and teaching situations, and he's just a really good friend of mine. And I really appreciate, Christopher, that you're taking the time to do this with me.
My pleasure.
It's going to be for the edification of all of our students and for herbalism and generally. And so Christopher is a licensed acupuncturist in the state of California and is practiced clinically. He's also as you can see there, a botanist, mycologist, uh, uh, sought after all over the world now for his knowledge of medicinal mushrooms. And so this is Christopher's website, and I want to point out one thing because I've never really looked at this in depth. But his herbal prescriber here is something that people can really use, and I think can get a lot of benefit from it. He is listing 440 plus ailments and symptoms and herbal remedies to use, and 261 medicinal herbs in a nice little compact form so that you can get dosages and cautions and common ailments that it's used for. So I recommend you're signing up for his newsletter and tuning into his website. And he has probably the most published herbalist alive these days. I can hardly keep up with all the books he's written. I don't know how you do it, Christopher.
I don't either.
And I could just go on and on about this guy, but as he says, he's probably the most overeducated person of all of us, and he still thinks he's just a beginner. And as well, I'm not going to say he's a beginner. He's certainly not. So he's one of the foremost authorities in the world right now on herbal medicine. So thanks for Christopher. And you have anything you want to say in regards on your own behalf here? Or
No, I don't like to focus on that aspect too much.
Yeah, I don't either usually.
Just establish that I've been doing it a long time, and it's something I love. My mom always told me, "Don't ever do anything you wouldn't do for free." So that's basically what I live by.
Hey, I think I've been taking your mother's advice without even having heard it. I'm on the same vein, and that's why we have the East-West Herb course, and I'm recommending many of my colleagues who have good courses and so forth. And I think Christopher, you have courses you teach.
Yes.
Students tend to migrate to different courses even when they sign up with one, and Christopher's would be a good one that when you're ready to do so, to check into. So
well, here at the there's a link there to my upcoming. With the mushroom and the brain down there below, there's a link to my upcoming series. You passed it. It's up a little higher, right on to the left. Keep going up a little bit more, and then it's right to the left there with the blue brain.
Oh, this one.
Yeah. So that's starting on Monday, July 25th, and it's going to cover all aspects of psilocybin mushrooms.
Wow, that's really coming up really closely. So if you really want to know the ins and outs of psilocybin mushrooms, it's a very hot topic in the herbal world these days. People are using it with great effectiveness in small doses for PTSD and depression and other things of that sort, and other stuff that whatever you want to say anything about your course, Christopher?
Yes. Well, you mean the magic mushroom course?
First of all, let me ask you: is it going to be recorded?
Yes, it will be recorded. And if you participate in the live classes, you have access to all the recordings. If you can't attend it live, then you can still. I think it costs less to just access the recordings and not be live. But it's more fun live because it's really like a community. We're going to have a big community and lots of questions. And that's almost the best part, because I always save half hour, 45 minutes at the end just for discussion and questions and answers. So you can have all your questions answered.
Well, I'll put that information on our herbal forum, the East West School. But this interview we're doing right now will be probably coming out during or after the mushroom course is completed. So anyway, it's going to be recorded and highly recommended.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Christopher, I don't know where to start in terms of what to discuss, but I think from our previous discussion, it seems like what's really fresh in your mind right now is the use of psilocybin mushrooms. What do you think is the value of them, and how does one get them these days?
Well, access, first of all, if you're interested in trying them, there are an increasing amount of growers out there. It's not that difficult to grow it. There are videos online to show you how to grow them step by step. There are people that you can just go on the web and find someone that sells sterile spore syringes of various types of Psilocybe cubensis. There are many strains, like Golden Teacher is one, Blue Meanies is another one, or Baby Blues is another one, and so forth. So you can get these potent strains. You can get the spores. Then you can buy sterile bags of spawn, and you just inject the spores in there. The mycelium starts growing, and then you have to put it in tubs with cooked rye grain and maybe a couple other additives, and then you mix the spawn in there, keep it in a dark, moist place, humid place, and then the mycelium grows out, and then eventually you'll start getting fruiting once you open up to some light. So it's not that difficult to grow them. It might take a little practice, and there are books out there too on psilocybin cultivation. If you want to just go ahead and buy them, then I can tell you that the only place in the country where you can buy them over the counter is Zide Church, Zide, Zide Church. And that's in Oakland, California, because psilocybin is decriminalized in Oakland. So you can literally go become a member of the church, accept psilocybin as your sacrament, and then you can go down to Oakland, downtown Oakland, and you can go right in. They'll screen you and so forth. And then you can go in to the counter, and there are people there waiting to serve you. And
we don't have to genuflect first.
No genuflecting. The women that were there were very nice, and
it's called Zide, Z-I-D-E, door.
Z-I-D-E, yeah, Zide Church.
Z-I-D-E
Church.
D-O-O-R.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Z-I-D-E-D-O-O-R. That's two words, right?
Right, Zide Church. So
they don't mail them out.
You can easily find it, and then you can buy an ounce of dried mushrooms of various cultivars. I went down there, and I bought some.
Well, many people who are going to be listening to this don't have access to going to Oakland. So is there any other way that they can be purchased?
Yes, it's all underground at the present moment. So you just have to find a grower. You have to ask around if you have any friends that might know. And I do know a person who is making liquids, liquid extracts, which is a good form to use them in. And
it's potent.
I can't. Yeah, it's really good. But on the other hand, she's just gearing up now, and I couldn't really give out her name just over our broadcast here.
Moving along, those of you who are not familiar with psilocybin mushrooms, I and probably Christopher and just about every other herbalist that I know that goes back to the 60s and are very familiar with psilocybin because it's a hallucinogenic mushroom. Carlos Castaneda wrote his books and talked about using it for psychic and spiritual journeys.
Right.
And I've used it several times. I far prefer it to LSD or things like that, which I've also taken. But we're talking about using it medicinally and micro doses. And isn't that mostly what you're interested in these days, Christopher?
Well, it can be used in a microdose, and microdose is anywhere from about 100 milligrams to about 500 milligrams of the dried mushroom. So you just take a piece of the cap or stem off, put it in your mouth, rehydrate it, suck on it, and then once it's rehydrated, you kind of break it up with your teeth.
So it's 100 to what? To what?
100 milligrams to about 500. Some people say that up to 1 gram is microdosing. I don't tend to follow that rule. I think anything over about 300 or 400 or 500, typically, there are some people that are rather resistant to it and have to take higher doses. But for the most part, if you take 300, 400, 500 milligrams of the dried cap, it's going to be distracting. It'll interfere with your day, the flow of your day. You're going to start laughing at certain things that you wouldn't normally laugh at. You'll take delight in colors and music, and you won't be hallucinating. That's not nearly enough mushroom.
Well, that's all true. But we're familiar with people having bad trips with psychedelics.
But not a small dose.
No?
That's why you start low and go slow. You start with 100 milligrams. There's no way that you could have a problem on 100 milligrams.
Okay.
And it's right at the threshold of even knowing anything is happening.
So what conditions would you be recommending this to? Because this is really where we're at. I'm not into selling or promoting psychedelics these days. I don't do them myself. Not just generally, I just don't do them many years now, because it interferes with my thought process and the flow of my interests these days. But
right, but you haven't. But that's if you're taking macro doses.
Right, we're talking about the use of microdosing primarily, right, Christopher?
Right, but yeah, I mean, the macro dosing going over 1 gram or even 1.5 grams, 2 grams or 3 grams or 4, that's a whole different story. There, right. I typically recommend that you're working with a facilitator, a trained facilitator, or a loved one that you feel really comfortable with that can hold the space for you, because that is going to be a significant experience. That
so we're getting deep into the actual taking of psilocybin, but now what are the uses for it?
So microdosing, there are a lot of clinical trials on psilocybin. It's been studied since the 1950s. So there literally are thousands of participants that have been in these clinical trials, using hallucinogens for a variety of ailments. And now we have some really good published studies.
Like what ailments?
We have some really good published studies and on these areas. First of all, mood disorders like anxiety and depression. Number 2, addictions. Number 3, existential fear and grief over a cancer diagnosis or having a serious illness where you feel like you might die. That's another big one. PTSD, that's true. Cluster headaches, there is some good research. These are the main areas, but of course, anxiety and depression and addiction are so prevalent out there that this, and my main point with psilocybin for these types of conditions is that according to the clinical studies, you get better results, or the researchers have seen better results than any other treatment, including SSRIs or benzodiazepines. And also remember that psilocybin is completely non-addictive. It's absolutely has the lowest potential for addiction of any substance.
I agree with that completely. But the question, of course, about the legality of using it and or prescribing or giving it to people. What have you got to say about that, my friend?
It's legal, not legal. It's been decriminalized in Oregon and Washington. Oregon has already published their draft guidelines for next year on guidelines for growing,
Oh,
making products, having a retreat center for receiving hallucinogenic therapy, psychotherapy, and again, products, selling, making, growing it, and selling products. All of those draft guidelines are out, and after the first of the year, some counties are going to be implementing those. I just read a couple of days ago
that's just
that
2 states.
yeah, Washington and Oregon. But also, it is decriminalized in Oakland, California, Santa Cruz,
Oh,
Denver,
great.
and a few other places. And
Yeah.
25 states already have considered legislation. So it really is spreading and growing.
Now, there are also therapists who are licensed who are conducting these kinds of sessions with people.
It's true, illegally and underground so
Well,
far.
they're not legal either. Okay.
No, it's all underground until the laws change, but it wouldn't be illegal in Oakland or Santa Cruz if there
Well,
is a guide, I don't think.
well, Christopher and I know very well what it means to be illegal as herbalists.
Yeah. I mean, even recommending astragalus to a cancer patient, you could end up in jail in the 80s.
Right. But and so I always say that laws are good to follow and they're also good to break when they need to be changed, because they don't change unless somebody gets out there and actually challenges them. And I guess I just stumbled into that because I never followed them when I first started, and I broke laws left and right. Presented Dr. Christopher in San Francisco, and he was recommending doing the iridology and recommending his products, and watched him being marched off to jail and put a $50,000 bail on him, and
Yeah.
for practicing. This is the background of how the herbal renaissance, the mid 20th century herbal renaissance got started. And so I think that maybe one may have to take that into account when you're thinking about the conditions that Christopher is talking about today that need treatment, and evidently psilocybin is highly effective. Would you say that, Christopher?
The treatment is highly effective. The studies are clearly showing a benefit greater than any known drug like benzodiazepines or SSRIs. So that's the exciting part. The people who get the best results and the longest term results, like for addiction or depression, anxiety, are people who report having a profound spiritual experience.
So that means taking a little higher dose, maybe with some guidance.
3 or 4 grams, yes.
Okay, well, so I don't recommend that. I've done it, but I don't recommend it. I recommend that you get with somebody who can help guide you in that process. But
Absolutely, I don't recommend it either, unless you have someone to hold, especially if you have pre-existing mood disorder or psychological disorder. Then you absolutely should be working with an experienced facilitator.
Yeah, I'll never forget the experience when I lived at Black Bear Ranch Commune in Northern California, and we used to have our more than one time a year experience of everybody getting high on basically LSD. I don't think we've done it with psilocybin, and the thought that it could be given to children, which was horrible, and it was given to a very young kid, and it damaged his nervous system as he grew even to this day. So I don't know if they could attribute that episode to that, but I would, because he was like catatonic when we were all stoned. It was pretty horrible. So you this is not something that you need to be afraid of. because it's really quite safe, especially if you're an adult. But giving it to children, I think I would be very careful about that.
Obviously, yes. I do know some parents that are trying microdose, very small microdoses in kids that have ADHD to see if it helps with their concentration and so forth. That's yet to be seen. We haven't really there are no clinical trials or any actual research trials to confirm the long-term effects or safety. So as with many herbs, it's the same way, right? There are no long-term clinical trials on some herbs. And in the 80s, when we started using them, there were very few long-term studies showing the safety and efficacy and maybe drug interactions or something like that. We didn't have a lot of studies. Now we do have a lot of research studies and that address those.
Experiential herbalist myself, I believe that every herb and every food affects our psyche. Maybe you have to be attuned to when you eat an orange, how you feel after you've eaten it, but just the energy of the plant changes things in your body. So it's not necessarily an unusual or bad thing if you're thinking about using an actual psychedelic in a small amount like that to kind of like just change your mood as you're going through your days. When you say that's probably a helpful thing, Christopher, low microdosing.
Yes, again, if you start with 100 to 200 or even up to 300, depending on how big you are and your sensitivity, that range, you can hit a sweet spot there where it's not really going to distract you. It's just picture you have a brighter mood, you feel more positive, and you feel more connected to your surroundings. You're going to be more mindful. You're going to be more in the present moment. A study came out recently where it was a fascinating study where this researcher sent apps, put an app on Apple or wherever store, and several thousand people all over the country got this app. And so the app notified them at odd moments during the day, what are you doing right now? Are you paying attention to what you're doing, or are you thinking about something else, or something like that? And it turned out once they did that for 2 or 3 months and got all that data from I don't know how many it was, like 1,000 people or 2,000, then they found out that most people are not paying attention to what they're doing about 50% of the time. The other 50% were up in our head thinking about whatever.
Right.
So psilocybin will help us be more mindful and more connected to our surroundings if it's a microdose and it's not interfering and distracting you. So you got to find that dose where it's not distracting you, but it can enhance your creativity, can enhance your ability to be mindful and be in the moment and pick up your mood.
Go ahead.
With really no side effects that I've ever seen, and also it absolutely has no addiction. I microdosed with psilocybin in the 70s for 9 months straight one time, 9 months every single day.
How did you notice any changes in your psyche?
I did. I started being a lot more open. I started having a kind of a spiritual, it really enhanced the spiritual awakening I was kind of feeling anyway, to a great extent. And it really opened me up a lot of things, rigid thinking and behavior. I could literally sing when I was out walking around. I could sing, I would dance around. I mean, it just really did loosen me up. And
people were going to think that maybe they're going to go crazy then if they do.
No, not at all. I didn't feel that at all.
But what did other people think about you?
Well, that's up to them.
Anyway, I know you pretty well. You dance around regardless of whether you're on psilocybin or not.
Yeah, that's just my nature.
So psilocybin and that whole class of hallucinogens and hallucinogenic mushrooms, particularly, I would regard as the true sacraments of the world. Would you think that, Christopher? Sacraments meaning holy things to take that actually help your spiritual life.
Well, sure. Um, people do people do report having the greatest and most profound spiritual experience of their entire life on a macro dose that in some of these clinical trials.
And the use of these things is common in almost every place in the world except the Western world, where it seems like the mentality here is to have more control over everything. But when people are in cultures where they feel like they don't need to have so much control, and that's in most places in the world, I think, the use of psychedelics is very common. And in the Western world, we use alcohol. Alcohol is damaging. Psilocybin, as far as we can tell from a lot of research, as Christopher can quote probably all kinds of studies, is not damaging whatsoever, and yet it alters consciousness, and it creates a more spiritual and an open attitude towards life. And have you had any experiences with knowing people who have had PTSD and anxiety and who have benefited from it?
Well, I worked with I worked. I have seen people personally, yes, go through really positive changes. I worked, or was close to a woman who is a psilocybin and hallucinogenic facilitator. She told me quite a few stories about the process that people that she was working with went through. For instance, one really struck me. Someone who grew up as a very devout Christian in a very devout Christian family, that was where dancing was not allowed.
That's you?
Huh?
You? No, not you.
No.
Okay.
No, the woman that I was close with for a while.
Okay.
That's a facilitator. She told me many stories about the people she was working with, which really inspired me, because she said that, for instance, this one person that I'm thinking about, a client that she was working with, thought that in her family, dancing was definitely thought to be sinful, and having, I guess, just having too much fun, being too light and too open is definitely not the way to go.
Yeah, you got to suffer in a lot of religions.
she had never been able to just relax and loosen up and dance, and on psilocybin she was able to do that, and she just broke down in tears because it was so the feeling that she was getting, the freeing feeling of not having that constraint of conditioning from severe conditioning and limitation from the family and from her community of obviously like-minded people. So I mean, I was very impressed with that. And I have another friend also who has been a facilitator for 35 years, and he's also told me many stories that are pretty remarkable. It really inspired me.
So I gathered from this that you yourself are not a facilitator.
No, no, I'm not. I'm not a facilitator, though.
Any ambitions to expand your wide range of work in herbal medicine? I mean, it's encyclopedia. You're gonna have to read about Christopher's life on his website, everybody. Any ideas of wanting to do that?
Yes, I did. I thought about going to California School of Integral Studies in San Francisco, because they have one of the better programs in the country for becoming, getting training as a guide. However, at the end of the day, I had second thoughts, because first of all, they were full for this year and maybe next year. Number two, it's really expensive. And number three, the point is, unless you have a you have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, I think you have to have a master's degree in psychology or some type of conventional degree in order to legally probably this is what's going to happen in Oregon. If you're a facilitator, a licensed facilitator, you're going to have credentials in psychology, which I don't have. Mine are in other areas. And so that means that you would be practicing underground. And that means that and there are networks of people that are practicing underground
Right.
since the 1950s,
Wow.
doctors, psychiatrists,
Wow.
social workers, et cetera, et cetera. Since the 1950s, there are underground groups that have been practicing continuously. And so I just thought, well, why should I pay all that money and and go through that training course when
Well, you
when
paid
I
enough, Christopher. You don't have to do any more courses.
I don't think I have to. And
But
and there
I want to remind everybody that that we all took a lot of psychedelics and a lot of psilocybin mushrooms in the past, and to my knowledge, thinking over dozens and dozens of people, I haven't seen anybody that was injured by it, and most people felt a benefit. But I don't
no
recommend you're doing it by yourself, because it can be you want to be with somebody who's had experience with it, whether they're a facilitator or not, somebody who has actually taken it and has experience with it, so they don't let you run out in the street and go whoopee in the middle of the street, because you might feel like that, not because you're crazy, but because you're looking at the world differently, which is probably the way we all should be looking at the world, more as an open space. And
yes, but it's unlikely. I think it's very unlikely that someone's going to do that, even under a high dose of psilocybin. It's just you still could injure yourself just because you're so not out in the practical everyday world. You're not really connected to that as much. You're going inside. You're connecting with spirit, and so even though I think it's unlikely, and very few reports have happened, yeah, there have been a few reports under strong doses of LSD or psilocybin that someone has harmed themselves, but it's fairly rare, but it's still better to have someone with you if you're taking a higher dose. And I say either a trained facilitator if you have any kind of psychological or mood disorder. I think it's very necessary to work with a trained facilitator.
absolutely.
If you don't, if you just you don't have any particular, but you want to go deeper, and you want to work on your inner self and find out what's happening there, and move more towards the light. You have a spiritual path, could be very helpful, but I still think it's good to work with someone, a loved one you feel very comfortable with, holding the space for you and keeping you safe, bringing you
Yeah.
water, changing the music or whatever, dimming the lights, whatever is necessary so that you have a good experience.
And we talked about at the beginning the availability of psilocybin, which is legal at this point in only 2 states, and different counties like Oakland have made it legal there. And I think that that's probably going to continue to open up.
It will.
Especially, is there a legal organization that is promoting it and lobbying for this that you're
There
aware of?
is in California. There's legislation. There are people lobbying for it in
I
a
mean,
number of states.
an actual organization.
Yeah, there's MAPS, MAPS, MAPS.
And
There,
what does that stand for, the acronym?
um,
Or maybe,
uh,
but it's about
psychedelic study. PS is this of the psychedelic or association, so it's the Association for Psychedelic Study. I've forgotten what the M.
so I imagine they have at least a few experts on their in the organization who can talk to lawmakers and around the country and lobby
Oh,
for
they're
it.
very active, yes,
So
and
this is
they've done the
something
most work on MDMA. They've done the most work on MDMA,
okay, terrific. Well,
and
this,
they were used to be in Santa Cruz.
huh.
MAPS used to be in Santa Cruz. I don't know if they still are. They may be in San Francisco now.
So I would recommend, because I haven't seen this organization personally, but I'm going to look them up when we get off this interview and find out about them. But these kinds of organizations are important and they need to be supported. So I think if you're seeing the kind of benefits that I know that Christopher and many of and a few other of my herbal colleagues who are more daring like Christopher is to get into the world of psychedelic mushrooms and the benefit to health and the psyche, anxiety, PTSD, things that are really difficult or impossible to treat with straight on herbal medicine and or acupuncture. Just forget it. Yeah, you get some benefits, you feel better, but to have a tool like that available is something we need to actually get behind and support. And I'm glad that you're one of the champions in this direction, Christopher.
Thank you. Well, I just realized, I've been watching a lot of Gabor Mate's talks and videos, read three
Who's
of his
that?
books. Gabor Mate, Gabor, Gabor Mate. He is absolutely fantastic. What an individual.
Matay?
Mate, Gabor Mate.
Gabor Mate, MAT.
Yeah. And he was a medical or he is a medical doctor, but he worked with people with addiction for many, many years up in Vancouver. And so he has a lot of history counseling people, working with people that have addictions, that have early trauma, and that's his focus. And I just realized more and more his thought is that a lot of, well, most psychological and mood disorders have at their foundation our early childhood experiences, such as frank abuse, like sexual abuse or being beaten or whatever. But it's much more than that. He talks a lot about attunement, about the importance of attachment, developing a good, strong attachment with their caregiver at a very, very young age, and also attunement, which means that the child and the parent is going to attune to each other by looking at each other closely, by being with them, and the child feels that the parents really care about them and really are there for them. So in our busy world, when we're off running around all the time, we may love our children, we may not be abusing them, but on the other hand, are we sitting down with them and really attuning and giving the child that attunement that they so much need? And so he talks a lot about that. And I started realizing that, and then I started meditating and more deeply on my early childhood and trying to feel experiences and things that I had. I had a pretty good childhood. There were challenges here and there, but certainly it was, my parents loved me, and there wasn't any frank abuse. But my mom was an alcoholic, so she kind of checked out at about 5, 6 o'clock at night every night. So she was a functional alcoholic, and I think I did have abandonment issues, no doubt, through that, and that has affected me. I went through a lot of therapy in Polarity Institute, doing role playing, Fritz Perl's chair work, and so forth.
Right.
To work all that out, and I did. I went through some training courses and up in Orcas Island, and I was able.
You never feel abandoned anymore?
I'm sure it's there. It's going to be there. I mean,
of course it is.
That's part of our body, a part of our mind and psyche. But it doesn't have to control us. It doesn't have to hold us back. It doesn't. Once we realize that, we're able to look at it and we're able to acknowledge it first and foremost, and forgive and just feel like. And then ayahuasca was another big part of my journey. When I went to Peru and took ayahuasca, I mean,
we're not going to get onto that subject. That's a big one, but this is about psilocybin, and I think we're almost at a concluding point here, Christopher, for our listeners' attention span and
right, and
being able to contact you on your website. I'm going to show it again, take his 7-week course. There's the Magic Mushroom course on ChristopherHobbs.com. Christopher is I know could continue to speak for days. He's going to do 7 days on this. On
Well,
this.
let me just say one thing, Michael, and
No,
that
say
is
more than one.
you were talking about the biochemistry of herbs and the advantage of learning that, and the energetics and so forth. And I am a big fan of that. And even though I do just follow traditional methods as well, and theory and thought in traditional Chinese medicine or other traditional methods of healing, I certainly, and how it's individualized, and how we look at the signs and symptoms of the body. In a way, we attune with our patients, and more doctors don't have time. MDs don't have time to attune with their patients. They're looking at the computer screen while they give you 10 or 15 minutes, and then they order the labs, and you're out of there. Yeah. And so, people, that isn't a healing experience for many people. And so I'm very much into that aspect. But I think for me, and I'll just say one more thing, and that is when I evaluate a treatment or an herb to use with my patients, I want to know that it has the highest level of support behind it, because I want it to work. I want it to give them some benefits. They're paying money to me, and they're buying the supplements and so forth, the herbs. I want to make sure that I've done my due diligence, and that it has the highest likelihood to be beneficial for them. And so I look, first of all, at the traditional use and the historical uses, of course. Like Vitex was used for 2,000 years as for regulating the menstrual cycle and easing menstrual symptoms. 2,000 years. So that's pretty good for safety and effectiveness. And then after that, I want to look at traditional medicine and how it's used.
Well, this is a whole other discussion.
Just two more points and I'm done. And then the third is the science behind it, the clinical trials. And then fourth, my colleagues and my clinical experience. So those are the four pillars that I review, and the biochemistry is part of the science, of course, and the pharmacology. So those are the four pillars. That's all I want.
And I'm hoping we're going to have an opportunity to have an interview strictly on that topic alone, because I want to be able to ask you some questions and get some feedback from you on specific aspects. But again, for the sake, I know that you have another appointment to go to today, Christopher, and I really appreciate you taking out the time to do this. And I'm going to, again, bring up your screen. I think I still have it here. No, yes, no, it went away. Anyway.
People, just ChristopherHobbs.com. Follow me on Instagram. I'm doing many reels on Instagram about different individual herbs, including Vitex recently. Yeah,
I've been doing that lately too. I'm surprised that people are willing to take such a short little introduction when we could talk a lot more on them than what Instagram allows. But anyway, this has been great, and I hope that we'll have another opportunity to work with you, Christopher, in this mode. It's been very, very useful and a benefit to everybody, including myself.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Thanks for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be with you and your students. Yep.
We'll see you at some concert or some other things that we share. Christopher and I are really soul brothers, so I don't want it to sound like that we're just two regular people just kind of talking, interviewing formally. This is a much more personal thing for me, and I'm sure it is for him as well. Thanks again, Christopher.
Yeah, let's go see a concert.
All right. See you later, my friend.
Bye for now, Michael. Bye.